Hello, Internet! You're listening to Forum Junkies, the program that promotes your anguish and feeds on your sweet, delicious tears. I'm your host, Spiritus. Joining me, as always, is the man who surgically implanted a modulator into his vocal cord solely to impress you, yes you, Papa Paint. And the ferocious feral, the bear that bears all, the man who put the rage into the rage bar, Darksend. On this week's episode, we'll be highlighting interesting posts on WoW forums from across the internet on subjects including, has the world been taken out of Warcraft? The difficulty incentivizing tanks and healers to queue for RDF, the availability of loot for non-raiders, and the impact of trading in-game items and gold for real-world currency. But first, I want to invite you to like us on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/forumjunkies and click the like button. Also, follow us on Twitter at forumjunkies, all one word, and for you social networking pioneers, you can now add us on Google+. So getting right into it, the first post we're highlighting today comes from Cavareth on the official forums, who asks if the world has been taken out of Warcraft. Cavareth writes, quote, "No one spends any time in non-capital cities, i.e. anywhere other than Stormwind or Orgrimmar. Personally, I see this as a problem. These other cities may not be as new and shiny, but there's certainly a change of pace I like. Why revamp the old world when the old world gets secluded just to being the capital cities? The only people who ever see these cities are people mage porting to get from one specific old world area faster." Again, that's Cavareth from the official forums. Now, obviously there's a bit of hyperbole here, and certainly it's not universally true, but it does beg the question, is this really a product of game design, where there's no incentive to go out in the world, or is it that most players just have seen what there is to see after playing for so many years? I mean, is the practical world actually smaller, or has the perspective on the game just changed?
Well, first I want to say there were a lot of good posts on this topic, and the reason we picked this one is because there was a blue reply in this one, which pretty much...
Terrible blue reply.
Yeah, it's pretty much the reason we started this show in the first place. But to get back to your question, let's break down the reasons as to why you want to leave a capital city. Trade skills, mining, fishing, herbing,
right,
dailies, or just grinding to make gold.
Even dailies these days are limited to, pretty much one or two relevant areas. There was Tol Barad, and then once everyone finished with those dailies, now everybody's doing Molten Front, and pretty soon Molten Front will be deserted completely, and it'll be some new area.
Right.
Exactly what you just said. They will be deserted completely. Unlike dailies in the past, in this expansion, once you finish that daily chain, for example, in Molten Front, unlocking the vendors, there is never a reason to go back and keep doing the dailies.
Like you'd said, the blue post in this was kind of one of the main reasons that we wanted to highlight this topic, because the blue didn't necessarily deny that there was a problem. In fact, the response was, I see players in all of the cities all the time, which is anecdotal and honestly
completely wrong,
fairly untrue. I play on Mal'Ganis, which is an extremely populated server, and you can /who at any time in pretty much any city but Orgrimmar and return with under 10 players.
Yeah, we call that the Heisman, because he totally stiff-armed the question.
But it was he totally ignored the problem at hand, which is the idea that World of Warcraft is, like you said, supposed to be a world. It's supposed to be this large interactive area with things in lots of different places. I mean, it doesn't really feel like a world if you sit in Orgrimmar the entire time spamming trade chat, trolling people, and waiting for your queue to pop.
That's true, but is that kind of organic, though, to the fact of the game being out for 7 years? I mean, we've seen all the game. Like, let's
go to the other two things I said. Trade skills and farming for gold. One is a product of the other in that you have so much gold now. Gold has never been as inflated as it is right now. And because of that, if you want to level a trade skill, you just buy all your ore or your herbs off the auction house, and you don't actually have to have an alt or even your main character just level up mining to level up another one. You just buy all the mats straight off the auction house, and then you're done.
Right.
And I think the underlying problem of this is, honestly, I think it's guild perks. There's no reason to mine, because like I said, gold is so inflated you could just buy everything. At least in my guild repairs are always on, because we sell BOEs, the guild challenges rake in so much gold per week, and cash flow is just siphoning so much guild to the guild bank that your guild covers everything. I don't have to herb, because flasks and potions are provided. I don't have to fish, because unlike last expansion, the feasts now cover agility. Some mastery tanks still have to. Other than that, I don't think anyone, once you have feasts, actually has to fish anymore. And the guild banks are just repositories of gold now that cover everything for your guild if you're in a successful guild, usually.
So you think we could just fix this by fixing the value of gold in the world and actually start, like, actually devalue it? Like, you think we need a Fed for Azeroth?
I think the gold inflation is maybe part of the problem, but I think that regardless of the cost of gold, the people that really, honestly, the people that seem to be out there farming are either A, gold farmers, or B, people who actually enjoy going out and mining or fishing for whatever reason, whether they find it relaxing or just a nice change of pace. But ultimately, even those people aren't necessarily leaving for any reason other than to do that specific trade skill. And a lot of them have maybe one or two set places or set routes that they take in order to find this. I mean, you ask someone who is a miner where they go to mine, and they're going to tell you, oh, I follow this route in this specific area. And you're still sort of left with the same problem, which is that there is no need to interact with anything outside of the capital cities.
So are you guys saying that this is just natural? It is something that has to happen? You can't solve it?
I think it's partially natural. There's no reason, say, in Cataclysm for someone to wander back to Northrend and hang out in Dalaran. But it's also indicative of the game. They have put pretty much anything that is even remotely important in Orgrimmar, whereas that wasn't always necessarily the case. I mean, even in BC, you didn't have jewel crafters in every city, which was inconvenient, but it made you have to travel. And traveling is honestly kind of part of it.
Another thing is, though, during Vanilla, Silithus was an amazing zone. Say what you want about it. Doing those every day, going from the small stones to the medium stones to where you get the raid bosses, the 20-man raid bosses. I was out there almost every day with my guild at the time that was a mostly 20-man guild doing AQ20 and ZG. We were out there every day farming those mats and doing those bosses 4, 5, 6 times a day. It was so much fun. And I feel like if they tried to do that again in today's game, it just wouldn't work.
Okay. Well, our next topic is on the difficulty of incentivizing tanks and healers to queue for RDF, and Slavaa from the official forums made this post. Slavaa writes, quote, "The problem was that people weren't queuing for heroics as tanks and healers for a variety of reasons. Probably because they got a lot of the grief when things go wrong, and it's a stressful role to begin with. Those reasons aren't things that Blizzard can fix at all, so they have to offer something to tanks and healers to give them an incentive to queue up as such. To do that, you can't just give them a run-of-the-mill things that they could just buy for 20 gold on the auction house. It has to be a very substantial reward." Now, honestly, I really don't think there's a reasonable way to balance the RDF queue times. First, the design of the game is completely weighted towards there being a greater than a 1-1-3 tank healer DPS ratio, which is compounded by the fact that DPS specs are just plain more popular with the general player base. I mean, am I really off base with that?
Yeah, I think that kind of like you said, and one of the better points in this post was that, like he says, people weren't queuing for heroics as tanks and healers because they got a lot of the grief when things went wrong. That's not something that I think can be fixed by saying, okay, well, here's a little bit of extra stuff. No tank I know was ever like, well, you know why I hate queuing for heroics? Because not only do I get the blame, but I don't get enough stuff too. It's, I mean, that's fundamentally not the problem, and it's not, I think, a good incentive. On top of that, you sort of will always have more DPS around than healers and tanks. It's, Blizzard has set up the game this way, and the idea of having to wait around with your group for a healer or tank is nothing new. Even way before Dungeon Finder, which has its own negative implications in terms of what we were just talking about. But way before that, it was difficult to find a tank or a healer in BC. You sat there spamming trade chat, LF tank for, I don't know, anything, over and over and over. And
LF tank, human strat.
Yeah, exactly. It was basically the same thing, except now the interaction is taken out of it. And in a way, I think that's kind of part of why tanks and healers are catching even more flack. I think that the random dungeon finder has been worse on tanks and healers than it used to be.
Well, I want to add this little bit of insight. A wave of alts in my guild just hit 85 this week. And they mentioned that the queue times for DPS in the old heroics are about half the time they are in the ZG heroics. So I don't know if that's playing into it as well. But the ratios you mentioned are certainly a reason as to why the DPS queues are so long, but I don't think that's all of it. The other day, I was waiting for an invite while my guild was working on Balrog, and so I queued up. It was the Call to Arms tanks. Queued up, got a Vortex Pinnacle. Not very AoE friendly to begin with, but I get in, and first of all, I changed my gear because we have so many stacks of that, whatever that buff is called. So I changed my gear, put on my full DPS gear in my tanking spec in bear form. By the end of the run, I had 16, 17k DPS. Next highest person, 12k DPS. The next two DPS combined didn't even beat me. I just find that completely unacceptable. And the other thing I find completely unacceptable is some instances, since Vortex Pinnacle isn't one of them, I can't use an example from there, but some instances, you can easily pull 10, 15, 20 things at once. As a tank, DPS don't even care. You are expected, as the tank, to tank all 20 things at once and survive. As a healer, you are expected
preaching to the choir. Yeah.
As a healer, you are expected to keep them up also. The DPS who pulled those 20 things, if they die during the pull, even if they're the only one who died, because, let's face it, I let them die on purpose. I know you guys do too. They'll vote to kick you even if it's a successful pull, just because they died. Where's the recourse for them kicking you when people automatically assume, it was the DPS who's being vote kicked on? People don't look at who is being vote kicked, and I think that's another problem.
I know, I just smashed that yes button. They could be kicking. I mean, if I were allowed to vote on me, I would kick myself so many times by now. But,
exactly.
Yeah, the number of times that I've wandered into, a random heroic, either because I was very drunk or because a guild member needed me to help them out. The number of times that I go in, pre-tier 12, it's tier 11. I go in, I've got full 372, Blackwing's Bane title, and some DPS, pulls 4 mobs and is off in the corner tanking them by themselves, and they get pounded into the ground and they're sitting there crying, and they will immediately blame me. Now, there's a chance that I really do suck terribly, and that I've just been awfully lucky with all of my experience in instances and raids and stuff. But there's also an extremely strong chance that DPS is just functionally clueless, and I think that the random dungeon finder has lowered the tolerance of the average player to helping players below them. I know it has for me. If I have a DPS that sucks, I'm more inclined to just kick them than I am to sit there and explain to them, no, listen, look, one of the best ways to do this is A, not pull aggro, and maybe use fade or something like this, but that sort of doesn't exist anymore. You just go straight for the kick and everybody just sort of mindlessly mashes the button.
So, I mean, besides more players playing the game that have an interest in tanking and healing, is there really any way to fix this, or it's just part of what the game is and it's just going to be that way?
I think one thing that definitely needs to happen is all of the healers in the world need to realize that it's actually a lot more fun to heal a group of terrible people than it is to heal a group of good people. I'm serious. It's so much more stressful and so much more fun. I've had more fun.
It's always fun as a tank being first on damage meters too.
It's a friend of mine slapped on a bunch of blues and greens and went and tanked ZG, and I was healing him, and we had these 3 pug DPS that I don't think knew which way was up. And that was some of the most fun I've had healing an instance in my entire life. And that was because no one kicked me.
So basically, we need to do PSAs for the RDF for tanks and healers.
Remember, it's more challenging to do this.
Yeah. Okay, well, our next topic is on the availability of loot to non-raiders. Lacryma from the official forums writes, quote, how much trouble would it be if Blizzard were to set the tier 11, reread I said 11 not 12, shoulders and helms for 1600 VP? One of the great things about TOC and ICC was that a person could work towards their gear slowly, but it was doable. It usually took as long as what we're dealing with on the Molten Front, but it had an end in sight and a payoff. For non-raiders, there isn't one really. They're deprived of completing their sets. Some short-sighted people can say you don't need the gear if you don't raid, but that argument only would fly in vanilla where there were dungeon sets you could work to. Sets of tier gear are for both raids and yes, dungeons now. So what do you guys think? Are like full prior tier sets something for dungeons now? And are full prior tier sets something that should be available to all players via VP? Is like the current design okay, or should old dungeon sets make a reappearance?
I'm sorry, there's no justification for what this guy is. I mean, maybe I'm just an elitist douchebag, which I wouldn't put it past me to do, but I'm sorry, like. I think it shows a fundamental disconnect with what loot actually does, what it provides players, and what the point of loot is. And I'm not arguing this from I want to always have better loot than other people. I really don't care what other people have. But what is significant is that content is balanced around it. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, dungeons are not balanced around having a full tier set. I'm sorry. And having a full tier set is something that is useful in raids. And quite simply, you do get to do raids and you get to brag and you get to say, I have these little shoulders. most of the posts in this thread the whole way through that are agreeing with the OP tend to be people that are saying things like, no, heroic loot is for the raiders and all the rest of the loot is for everybody else. And they're leaving out the entire section of raiders that doesn't do hard modes. I feel like they should get something for vanity, but aside from that, there's no need for anyone who is not raiding to have a full tier set.
Yeah, I guess this maybe is something where I'm just kind of an odd egg with all of this, because I've never been a big loot person ever. Loot for me is, can I do my job? Like, if I can do my job,
right.
What's on my character does not matter, except for maybe like a vanity perspective. Like, from a vanity perspective, I enjoy having nicely looking matching gear. But
fashion
like from a fashion sense, I like the style. What can I say?
No, I completely disagree, because I've been thinking this whole time since this question came up. If you had asked me this question going from Sunwell at the end of TBC to New Nax at the beginning of Lich King, I would have said, go away. I don't need this. And my primary reason for wanting loot at that point was to stand around and chat and some guy whispering at me going, "Oh my god, I love your gear, gimme." But once New Nax came around, even though I had the best gear, I looked around and everyone looked identical to me. It's not so much that I want to have the best gear, it's that I want me having the best gear to be slightly more noticeable in a crowd of 50 people who all have the exact same set. And maybe that's getting off topic a little bit, but I don't care. That's my main reason. That's my main reason for being the best that I can be in raids. As for this question, there is absolutely no reason you need it, but I've never understood why you're not allowed to have your 4-piece. The set bonuses are a big thing, even with last tier. And I think that I think maybe they should do 6-piece sets where, maybe just from an aesthetic point of view, you can have a matching set. But the fact that there's a 4-piece set bonus and having 2 pieces not available just kind of sits wrong with me.
How about the dungeon sets though? Do you think those should make a reappearance? Do you think that's compelling for people who just run dungeons to be able to build a dungeon set? And how does that work? When you're looking at wanting to this model that Blizzard has of being able people to step right into the current tier. Like, how do you balance that if you have both available? Should tier pieces just be available in raids at all, and then dungeon sets or dungeon sets?
I'm honestly surprised the 346 blue gear was not into a set at some point. Just completely breaking the mold. And to be honest, going back to vanilla again, that was so much fun. First, having to get your 8-piece set, even when it was completely obsolete, and then having to get it again and upgrade it into that 0.5 dungeon set. Those quests were a lot of fun.
Right.
Yeah, and
even when those items were completely obsolete and you were in full Nax gear, they were still fun.
I do dislike that pretty much the only raid or heroic dungeon level quests are either kill this random end boss or find these 4 bushes of berries and pick a sponge berry from each of them. Aside from that, there aren't really any cool quests in a lot of these. It's very much go in, kill boss, get valor points, go to vendor, trade valor points for gear, and etc. There's almost a slight interactive quality that is lost, and not from a vanity perspective, but from an achievement perspective, from feeling like you have actually accomplished something. Gear certainly does not have that feeling anymore. I think it's certainly debatable whether or not that's a legitimate argument to make, but I think that most players who did a lot of the, everything from Thunder Fury to the dungeon set quests and things like that would say that even though it wasn't the best gear, it was still really fun to do it. And part of why a lot of people kept their tier 1 and 2 was because they were proud of the fact that they earned them. They had a lot of fun getting it, and that was a good reminder. There's sort of no need to keep your tier 8 around. Who cares? Tier 9 especially. Look at this. I did the first boss in TOC 400 times. That was fun.
Now it's higher item level, gimme, old item, vendor.
Okay, well, our final topic is the doozy, the one that everyone is chattering about on all the forums. And it's on trading in-game items and gold for real-world currency. And for those of you who aren't aware, Diablo 3's auction house, in supplement to its in-game currency-based platform, will also have a real money version where players can buy and sell items and in-game currency with and for dollars or euros or what have you. And Samayael from the official forums argued for this change and made this post recently. And the first paragraph reads, quote, They're not selling anything for real money. Other players are. This is already a system in D2, albeit unofficially through oft-times disreputable sites. By taking that part out of the equation, they're making an already existing system safer and lessening the impact of item farmers. The game is largely co-op action RPG and not an MMO, and the PvP they have in-game is already not really going to be a huge balance concern, given the almost straight PvE focus of that the game has. It's a smart move for D3. Arguing against this idea is Reev from TankSpot, who writes, so when I'm in the game, if a super high-end item drops, instead of equipping it if it's good for me or trying to trade it to another player if it isn't good for me, I feel the need to sell it. Why? Because not selling it is functionally equivalent to buying it off the AH myself. If I can get RL money for an item, the opportunity cost for not selling the item is a loss of real money. When I'm playing a game, I want to be immersed in that game's world, not thinking about my pocketbook. If I get a super mega awesome item drop, I want it to be a good thing for my character, no questions asked, not something I have to ponder in terms of my personal finance. There's just so much chatter on all the forums on this topic, and while it might not be super connected to WoW, it is something that could seriously affect macro game design in the near future. And I'm going to reserve comment for now because I'm actually really interested in what you guys have to say about all this.
Well, first of all, I want to say, when I first saw this and I saw the complaints going out, I said, what's the big deal? When you compare WoW to Diablo 3, WoW is an MMO where what other people have matters.
Right.
When you're in a top guild, when you're in a server-first, world-first guild, what other people have matters. In Diablo, what other people have it doesn't matter to me at all as a player.
Right.
What they're doing doesn't matter to me at all. I mean, yes, there's been talk about more group-based PvP stuff at where it will matter than was present in Diablo 2, and if that ends up panning out, it may play a bigger role in this topic, but for right now, what another player has in terms of gear in Diablo 3 has absolutely no impact at all on me as a player playing my own Diablo 3. Unfortunately, Reev's point completely blows that argument out of the water somewhat in saying that, well, if I can get money from them, from someone who does care,
right,
then it does affect me. The other reason why I don't care is because when I first saw this, hey, I can make money now doing this. Wait a minute. I can sit right here all day and make money. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's living the dream, just making money playing video games.
Playing video games, making my monies.
Yeah, I think it's a very sticky topic because, like a lot of topics in WoW, you really can't argue against it from a rational perspective. That is to say, I think that the rejection of it is purely is very heady and very steeped in emotion. For me, the conflict is not so much that other players will have gear or that it will be giving up the opportunity cost of items or anything like that. The problem for me is that it's a conflict of philosophy that I think is very blatant. You have this Blizzard philosophy, which has up until now been very much, things from the game should stay within the game. And I think
that's not just a Blizzard philosophy, though. That's what makes it so amazing, is that this is like a pan-industry philosophy that is being broken.
Except, and I think that this is the one exception to this, except for free-to-play games. Now, I'm going to get a little overly intellectual, like I have a tendency to when it comes to this sort of thing. I'm in sales. That's my real-world job, is to run around selling wine and beer. I don't get to sit around and raid all day.
It's the best job ever.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. But it's interesting because getting into some of the psychology of sales, once someone has invested in me, once someone has purchased a product from me, they are much more likely to continue buying either the same product or similar products from me.
Right.
And so making that first sale is very important. That continues into free-to-play games. It's things like League of Legends, or now Heroes of New Earth is now free-to-play, things like that. They're technically free games, but you spend $5 on this champion, and now you don't want to stop playing the game because you just spent $5 on this champion. You might as well get another thing for the game. You might as well get another hat for your guy in Team Fortress, and that costs you another $10. You're not going to stop playing the game anytime soon. And that's something that's great for cheap or free-to-play games because it helps them make money. For something like World of Warcraft, I mean, this is blatantly Activision getting in and basically trying to make a few extra bucks here. And also make it so that players aren't leaving Diablo 3 anytime soon. The problem with that is that people should be playing Diablo 3 because they think it's an incredible game with lots of in-depth game design, not because they've already sank $10 into some random hat and sword, and they feel like if they stopped playing now, then they would just be wasting that money.
This is what kind of makes my mind explode the most about this. And you kind of have to follow me on this one because it might be a little complex to convey over such a short period of time. But let's say you have player 1 and player 2, right? And they buy Diablo 3.
The names again?
Player 1 and player 2. Like Thing 1 and Thing 2 from Dr. Seuss.
Okay, all right, got it. All
right. But player 1 and player 2. So they buy the box for Diablo 3, and it costs them, what, $60? Who knows, right? Let's say it's $60. And,
well, it's Activision, $80.
Right. And so essentially what they're doing is they're purchasing access to virtual property, right? It's the same thing in WoW. Like, you don't own anything in WoW. You don't own your character. You don't own your gear. It's all it's all the property of Blizzard, right? So in essence, what they're purchasing is access to the company's product, right? And that's the same with WoW. It's the same in any game. You never own anything that you actually exist in the game, with I think maybe the exception of like Second Life, but it's kind of hard to call that a game.
It's life, man.
Yeah, it's life, and it's the second one. So let's say you have player 1, and player 1 gets an item in the game, and that item is pixels, right? And the pixels are the property of Blizzard, okay? So Blizzard still owns the property. Player 1 then sells that item, which is Blizzard's property, to player 2 for real currency. Now, player 2 has that item, but it's still Blizzard's property. And
I see what you're getting at.
Blizzard gets a cut of that share. And doesn't that kind of make your mind explode? In essence,
that's a bit sticky.
There has been no exchange of goods and services. I've paid for something basically to transfer my access to this item that's owned by someone else to now allow this person to have access to this item that is owned by the same person. And it's like that it's the actual physical manifestation of that. The pixels has never changed hands. And that kind of makes my mind go pow.
Briefly, the player selling it is doing it to make money, so they're obviously okay with it and don't really care about that concept. And the person buying it doesn't care either because they're willing to part with their money, so they don't care about who physically owns the item. But I want to put this question to you. Would you rather have player selling to player, or would you rather have an item shop, which one would be unlimited? It would just flood the market.
I mean, do you want my real opinion? Like,
yes,
what I would want in the game? What I want in the game is for me to have a game that has awesome, like all the things that Papa Paint said, that has awesome gameplay, sweet graphics, cool story. And when I go and I play the game and I get items, they're my items, and not in the sense of like my items, like I own them physically, but I get the cool sword of awesomeness, and it is my cool sword of awesomeness, and now I get to hack and slash things with it, and it isn't tradable. Like I've never enjoyed the metagaming of trading ever in a game.
This is Activision we're talking about here.
I know it's Activision, but you asked me what I want in a game, and what I want in a game is for my stuff to be mine, and never to be like, well, maybe I should trade this. No, I can sell it to vendors. I can go and have fun with other people in a hack and slash dungeon setting, and I get an item, and now it's mine. I think all items in Diablo 3 should be bind on pickup, with the exception of maybe like potions and stuff, and that's it.
I agree, except had they put that in, I will 100% guarantee you they would have put a Blizzard item shop in the game, which would flood the market, and I'm much happier that it is player selling to player rather than Blizzard selling to player. Also, the counterpoint to that is, I'm going to counterpoint my own argument here, is the legality of it. The reason they're doing this is because they're basically admitting they could not combat botters in World of Warcraft. And if they can't do it in this game, the auction house is going to turn into an item shop where there will be, again, unlimited number of items. That is my main thing keeping me in check right here now, is because it is player to player, item quantity will be limited based on what players can get. If they can control botting, that will be a very good thing for the game.
But in this sense, though, Blizzard is, in all intensive purposes, creating laws of the game. That's what game design is creating a framework for which
it is a very, very, very dangerous precedent. I agree with that.
Does it stop botters, though? I don't think it does. I mean, there's
no
reason
it doesn't.
You can't have.
No, that's what I'm saying. Blizzard has to design a system in which they can catch botters. Because right now, you go to any outdoor zone in World of Warcraft, which we have already established no one does, but you go to any outdoor zone in World of Warcraft, and you will find 5 different level 60s and level 85 zones under the world mining all your mines.
Actually, in fact, just to mention, at the time of this recording, all three of us left our home cities, and we saw not 4 but 5,000 Chinese gold farmers in every single area outside of the capital cities. And we know no one's going to double check this fact, so we're okay saying it.
At least 5,000.
At least 5,000. I mean, I think that it doesn't. It's not going to remove gold sellers, botters, etc., etc. And I also really dislike this whole theory of if you can't beat them, join them. I mean, it's basically Blizzard saying, well, you know what, screw it. If people are going to break the rules, you might as well just allow everybody to ignore this fundamental aspect of game philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I understand the reason why they're doing it, but the reason why they're doing it, I do not think is because, oh man, outside of game trading was such a huge part of Diablo 2. Everyone was doing it, and now we have to provide this thing for you. What it was that the game was released in 2000, right? Just to put this into perspective, college freshmen.
How long ago? Holy.
2000 was when Diablo 2 was released. College freshmen right now, when Diablo 2 was released, were 9. Graduating, like people graduating from college, were 11 when Diablo 2 was released. Okay, so there's a huge period of time that this game has existed, and what had happened was you had the game as it existed, which was a hack and slash dungeon crawler, and then people play the expansion and they're like, oh wow, I've beat the game a bunch of times and I've kind of had my fill, and that's where like most of the player base kind of dropped off. But you had still people who wanted to play the game. And so they kept playing the game, and there wasn't much to do because they beat the game a billion times. So they created a metagame, which was trading. And Blizzard said, wow, there's a significant number of people who like trading. But I don't think that is representative of what most people wanted out of Diablo. I think what most people want out of Diablo is the hack and slash and the fun and the story and the graphics and all that stuff. Now, that being said, I know that you can perfectly well play the game and not access this shop at all and not use the real world money.
I want to point out, this will not even be available at all to people playing hardcore mode.
That's true.
I mean, you can also just turn off the ICC buff, and we might as well go ahead and mention here that heroic modes are totally optional, and that there's absolutely no reason for players to ever want to.
Right. I mean, there's a false choice there.
The problem, I mean, like I said, the problem ultimately for me has absolutely nothing to do. I mean, honestly, my problem has nothing to do with specific in-game implications. Like we'd said, I don't care if someone beats Diablo 3 faster than me. I really don't.
Right.
Especially since I'm going to be buying it a lot later than everybody else because I'm going to wait for reviews. But but it's an intrusion of business philosophy into my video games. And quite honestly, a part of the reason that I enjoy playing video games is escapism. I kind of like not going, oh, shoot, I got to pay rent later. Oh, man. You like I said, you were really only changing an emotional interaction with the game, but I think that only is a very, very poor choice of word there.
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned this last time when it came with like the CC thing, when we were talking about things being an emotional change or like is there an investment versus like a gameplay functionality. And I think you kind of hit it on the nail that there is something to be said about having an emotional investment in something that should be a part of game design rather than just looking at the flat A plus B equals C.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't think that there's any practical way that you can look at this in-game auction house and see it as anything but good.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the precedent they're setting, and because this is Activision, if this is popular, Activision is going to push as hard as they can with all their might, which is apparently a lot more than all of us thought, even though we knew this going in, and they kept denying that this was the case, but we all knew it. They're going to push with all their might to get this into WoW if this is successful in Diablo.
Well, that's all the time we have for this edition. You've been listening to Forum Junkies with your host, Papa Paint.
Yes.
Darksend.
Hi.
And, of course, yours truly, Spiritus. Remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And as we will every week, we end our webcast with a segment we like to call Cool Story, Bro.
Stop acting like WoW is original, bro. LOL. They took so many things from others' game, and they keep doing it now. Check soon. They gonna have PvP daily in the new 85 zone. Just check that coming soon. P.S. If you like getting ripped off and get 7 bosses every 6 months, that aight, little guy. But when they make over 100 million a month, you can expect a little more updates than that shit, LOL. 7 boss unbelievable, happy I quit before that patch came out, my god. Darkness, MMO champion.